For those of you who come to our meetings a lot, you'll know that last time I was told that the music was so soft and slow that we didn't know if we
Yeah.
could take it for a whole month. So how you like me now?
Womp womp.
Also, if you come to our meetings a lot, you know that what we're going to tell you next. Turn your cameras on because we like to see your faces and you can't win without it. And when we're live and networking, we won't know you if we can't see you.
That's
So
right.
y'all, good job. Lots of you have your cameras on tonight. Two
Smiley faces.
announcements. Our Unbus tour. We only have 5
Oh,
spots left, y'all. It's capped at 50. So if you want to go on that Unbus tour, get registered. We are still looking for one more property to feature, although I just got a message from someone, we might have found that last one. We're trying to have an all phases to show you. So we're looking for one at the very beginning, just starting. And then we can have them all the way through to show you from start to finish. That's going to be February 20th from 10 to 1. We are still looking for a couple sponsors as well, 1 or 2 more sponsors. And we are also looking for vendor members. And this is a chance to make a little commission. Who do you like? Who do you like to do your hair? Who do you buy your tires from? Who do you use to paint? Who do you use for new roofs? Anything, any service provider or vendor or retailer that you like as a potential vendor member, and we will give you a cut if they join. If you send it to us, stick us a note in the chat and you can make a little money. Okay, mentor program is up and running. Lionel is in charge of that. And we have all the mentors that we need now, but it's always open to new mentees. Is that right, Lionel? There's no real deadline because it's rolling. So if you're interested in a mentorship program, get hold of Lionel. We have our TREIA Brain Trust now. If you are an experienced member who's been with us for a while and want to get in on some, first time deals and be recognized as a leader in TREIA, have opportunities to present and special offers, drop us a note. We'll get you an application for the Brain Trust. Prep in person, we've had prep virtual. We have the second one coming up this month. I have a good idea of what I'm going to do, but I don't have it finalized yet, so I won't entice you with it. But this is our series where we take you step by step through some very basic functions so you actually learn to do it hands-on, not a bird's eye view. The first one was very fun and very successful. We also have prep in person. If you are on this meeting and signed up for prep wholesale, I have not gotten an email out yet, but I'm meaning to. We have 9 people signed up so far. We need 10 for the class to start. It's capped at 20. So we're 1 person short of starting that class. Prep rehab, where the class will actually buy a house and rehab it, is a little further down the road, but keep sending your interest in that. I have not sent applications out for that yet. 1 step at a time, my friends. We are also looking for a vendor member coordinator. This is a paid position on commission. I think that is all the announcements I have. Remember, on our social medias now, we have a new feature, which is 2 Rehab Tuesday. You can follow along 2 very different rehabs, one quick fix and flip, the other one an entire gut, and I mean moving around rooms and redesigning the whole house. And what I haven't told you yet, this is on social media only, so check out Facebook. What I haven't told you yet is, guess what? Those 2 properties are both going to be on the rehab tour as well. So not only can you follow along, you can see them in person. On our meeting tonight, we have board members, Karen Lewis, Leslie Ortiz, Jackie Richards. We have Lionel Finley. Of course, we have our beloved subgroup leader, Karen. And we have Crystal Slater on the
hey,
board.
Crystal.
That's all I see. I'm sorry if I'm missing someone.
I think that's it.
Now, Leslie's going to give you a couple updates about what's coming up, and then she will turn it over to
Karen. Okay. Hi, smiley faces. Thanks for being here. Good to see everybody. Of course, we've got a fabulous meeting tonight with Mike and all about the dreaded home inspections. But necessary evil. And then, of course, tomorrow night with Andrew, your subgroup leader, and new investors meeting starting at 6 tomorrow night is Lionel is going to Lionel's going to jump on and spill some of his deepest, darkest secrets.
Woohoo.
No, actually, well, you never know. Lionel comes up with some strange stuff. But, basically, it's if you had to start all over again, your entire investing career, and you only had $20,000 to do it, how would, knowing what you know now, how would you structure it? How would you proceed? And Lionel will give you a few tips and tricks on his background and how he made it through some milestones and some stumbling blocks and some things that drive you crazy. So that's tomorrow night. It's going to be very interesting, new investors. And then on Friday, that would be the 12th, Friday, yes. With Melanie, experienced investors, we are going to have, what's her name? Rosetti. Stacy.
Oh, yeah, Stacy.
Huh?
Stacy.
Yeah, Rosetti and she has her own REIA down in the Atlanta, Georgia area. She's very experienced, runs a bunch of stuff down there, but she homes in on self-storage facilities and how to find them, how to finance them, how to make them work for you. So that's going to be all about self-storage on Friday with Melanie.
Awesome. She's great.
She is. She has got some really cool ideas about how to go about finding stuff. And then, of course, looking forward to the main meeting on the 16th. It's a lead source that you would, it's something that you wouldn't ordinarily think about, but we have a very innovative system with Philip Vincent from Mom's House. If you Google momshouse.com, you'll see what they're all about. He's going to come on and talk to us about where to find these almost what's it called? No competition on these leads. And it's with Mom's House, they do a very altruistic thing. They help families with aging parents and try and help them out of situations that they find themselves in. And it's very, very stressful for these people. And so they try and be a help to these people. And it can also lead to investing and acquiring properties. So it's a lead source just in a place you wouldn't ordinarily think about looking. So that would be the main meeting on Tuesday night at 6:30. And so everybody hop on that. And then, of course, with the rest of the month, just keep checking the calendar. We're posting stuff all the time. The meetings are going to continue. Can everybody just wave to me if well, no, hang on, wait till I ask the question. But hi, I'm glad you're waving. But can y'all let me know who would be into a rousing game of Cash Flow 101 on Monday night?
Yay, yes, yes.
With Audrea. We did this last month and it was just a blast. And if you've never played Cash Flow, it's really gonna teach you how to analyze properties and exit strategies and different stuff like that. So we're thinking about getting that set up for Monday night, probably about 6:30. And so Cash Flow 101, if everybody thinks they might want to join in on that, throw it in the chat. I'm just trying to get a head count here, but I think we're going to schedule that for Monday night. So it's a lot of fun. So keep an eye on that. You'll get the email. And Ms. Karen, take it away.
Hello, happy Tuesday, everybody. Thank you for joining us.
Lots of people are saying they're interested, by the way, just saying in the chat. Sorry, Karen.
That's okay.
Let's do it. It's fun.
Okay, so tonight we have got Mike Bergman, very special guest, and he is a licensed home inspector and an owner operator of Pillager Post. And I think all of us have had the experience of having to use a home inspector, not only buying our own personal properties, but when we sell one of our flips, our biggest heart sink is when the home inspector comes back with his report. So what Mike is going to give us a bit of a heads up on is the things that to look out for, potential pitfalls for us when we're putting together our flips, what to look out for, what to make sure we've taken care of. And one specific area that he's going to cover as well is in septic systems. Now, if you're like me, I know nothing about septic systems, and I think it can be a money pit if you don't know what you're looking for before you buy.
Ask me how I know.
Ask Leslie how she knows. Yes.
Yes. Money pit.
Yeah. So take it away. Thanks very much, Mike. Nice to have you.
Oh, thanks for letting me be a part of this today. So first of all, thanks for having me on. And Leslie and Karen, you both pointed out that, as a home inspector, one of the things that gets looked at very quickly is I'm not generally a liked person. I think I'm a fairly likable person, but in general, I'm not liked. I have the people who are selling the house worried of what I'm going to find. I have the people buying the house worried of what I'm going to find. I have the realtors on both sides worried about what I'm going to find. So generally speaking, that sometimes at the end of the inspection is a nice breath of air in there. So what I want to kind of cover today was sort of three different things. I don't know sort of where everybody is on their knowledge, technical knowledge, stuff like that. To understand a home inspection process and me as a home inspector, I'm not someone that comes out there when they're building something to code. I'm not a code inspector. I don't come out there and measure things and those kind of details. My job as a home inspector is to be knowledgeable on all the components that go into a home and be able to tie them together in a way to understand if one's not functioning, how it's affecting another. So for those of you who've had a home inspection, you've seen these reports, you kind of have an idea of what we're going through. I'm going to take the first part of this, just a few minutes, and kind of go through a slide that talks about what the home inspection process is. So if anybody out there has not been through one or is sort of wanting to see what that process looks like, I'll go through that first. And then, as she mentioned, I'm going to speak a little bit about septics. I'm not a licensed septic inspector. I'm a licensed home inspector, but I work closely with a company called Lynn Environmental. Carson Lynn comes out and goes to many of my inspections with me. So we do a lot of work with preparing for septics, and to the point made, you can get yourself in a boatload of money and problems with a septic issue that arises. I'll throw a few quick stories in there when we get to the septic part of it, but it's certainly an unknown. And I seem to find that more and more people, that's not something that they're even thinking about as they're walking through a house and picking it out. So anyway, I'll share my screen with you here real quick. All right, can everybody see my slides?
Yep, you're good.
Excellent. So, I own a Pillar to Post franchise. Now, Pillar to Post, just if you're not familiar with, this is the largest home inspection company in North America. We have probably over 600 franchises across the US. We have, I want to say, at least 5 of them right here in the Raleigh area. So I'm in good company with some of my other people here in this area. So we lean on each other a lot. That was one of the reasons I purchased a franchise. As a home inspector, I want to have as many connections as I can and as many people to talk to as I can. And just like you guys are doing this, I'm constantly in contact with home inspectors all over the country, trying to make sure that we're providing the best service we can and, really help people understand what we're doing. A home inspection process is something that we block out about 3.5 hours for, depending on, size, age, stuff like that. Understanding that a home inspection is a visual inspection. Some people ask a lot of times, how in depth are we going to get? Well, I don't tear things apart. And I can't move things either. So sometimes in a selling situation, when you go through a house and you're looking and there's a lot of maybe storage items and stuff that are in the way, sometimes that prohibits what we're doing. We follow, in this state, the North Carolina standards of practice. North Carolina is one of the probably best states in the country for home inspections as far as the detailed process that they go through. Like I said, I've connected with a lot of people outside of North Carolina. I can tell you we're one of the most detailed places around, which is good and bad. It's good for the end result, but to the point we were speaking about earlier, sometimes the process is a little overwhelming. You get written reports, they'll have pictures in them. And sometimes the clients ask if they can be there, and certainly they can. We always try and have the person selling the house be gone for that period of time. But I work primarily through real estate agents on the buying side. We do some listing inspections too, which is where a lot of times someone flipping a house or buying an investment property, I've had clients that are looking to purchase maybe a fourplex or something like that, and they want to have that inspected going in before they look at it. So sometimes on the listing side, we do that as well. But it's always important, I think, if we can get the person there that's being involved with it, whether it be the buyer or the seller. That way we can, really cover the information up front. They can see what we're talking about. Things I'm looking for. The number one enemy in any house is water. And it works its way down. And, one of the things we'll talk about towards the end is a little bit with crawl spaces and stuff. But in the end, I'm looking for how's water getting in and where's it causing damage. That includes the lot drainage, includes downspouts, that includes plumbing throughout the house. You can see kind of a quick diagram here. And this is especially important when you're looking at homes that are newer and possibly on slabs, because the height of the flooring in the house is relatively close to the ground. And if you don't have good lot drainage, I've had clients where water is actually getting into their house and heavy storm drainage and stuff like that. So one of the first things we do is we stand back and look at a house and look at the lot, how it lays out and where the water is going to go. If it's not raining and hasn't rained, you're not going to know based on the ground right now. So you kind of have to have that, macro view of what the lot looks like and see where you can see the potential problems. As you're going in, when you're, looking to whatever your investment purpose is, whether it's to rent it out, whether it's to flip the house, whether it's an investment property you're looking to live in, whatever it might be, understanding newer homes is key to it. I have a lot of people look at homes, they're like, oh, well, it's 10 to 15 years old, so there shouldn't be any issues with it. That sometimes can be the case, but it can be a little bit to the contrary too. As we go through homes, one of the things we're looking for are some of the major systems, the roof, the HVAC system, the water heater, things that are going to cost money. And when you're looking to buy an investment property, the big dollar things, and the septic's another one of them, those can set you back quickly. If you have to put new air conditioners in, let's say there's two of them, you're $12,000 in on new air conditioners. Water heaters are a couple $1,000s. Roof is $10,000 plus depending on the size. So, you can add up some money real quick if these systems aren't in play, and understanding how long they generally are good for makes a difference as well. So these are just some broad numbers here. Now, I understand these are sort of averages too. You can have a roof last, I've seen houses that have had roofs on them for 40 years. So it can happen. But generally speaking, when we look at asphalt shingles on a roof, we're thinking 15 years, and that's a good life for a 15-year shingle. Now, you'll hear a lot of times people will talk about asphalt shingles and say, hey, this has got a 25, 30-year warranty, so it should be a 25 or 30-year shingles, how they describe it. That's really not the case. Asphalt shingles are asphalt shingles. They have little rocks melted to the top with tar and fibers built into them, and they can get beat off with storms and rain and hail and everything else. The 25 to 30-year mark is what the manufacturer is guaranteeing for their personal defects on their shingle. If it's not a defect, in other words, it's just wear and tear, that's not something they're looking to cover. Air conditioners, 10 to 15 years. Conventional furnaces actually last quite a while. You're talking 20 to 30 years on those, where only the chances of you coming across some of the old conventional furnaces is pretty limited at this point. They've been doing mid or high efficiency furnaces for the last 25 plus years. So you won't see a lot of the conventional furnaces out there. Most of what you'll see will be mid or high efficiency. Not trying to get into a lot of technical training with this, but one real quick way you can tell is when you're looking at a furnace, the flue that comes out of it, where the gas is leaving the house, coming through, you might be seeing it in the attic, you might see it down in the crawl space. If it's plastic, it's a high efficiency. If it's metal, it's mid efficiency. The high efficiency furnaces are more expensive, and they don't last quite as long. We'll get into that in a minute. Hot water heaters, 10 to 15 years, and then paint on wood, I think 5 to 10 years is probably a stretch, but that's what we have in here. We talked a little bit about the air conditioner. Sometimes you'll find that the compressor is usually the first thing that ends up going on these guys. And at this point, most of the time, people will find out that it's just as inexpensive to go ahead and replace the whole system than trying to replace a big part like a compressor in it. So that's generally the direction to go in. So once again, you're looking at a full air conditioner. One of the things I do as a home inspector, and something that you can probably do pretty easily when you go in there, depending on whether it's a furnace or a heat pump. A furnace is using natural gas to heat the home, where heat pump is something where only electricity is at the house, so they're only using the heat pump, which is a little less good for winters, and you won't see them much up north. They only are efficient down to the mid to low 30 degrees. So when we've had a couple of these nights recently where we're at 20 degrees, if you have a heat pump, it's working all night and it's probably struggling to keep up. But one of the things you can do is if you have a temperature gauge with you, you can always come by one of just little thermometers you use. You can buy them on Amazon. You pick them up at Lowe's that can tell you the temperature coming out of the vents when the heat's on or the air conditioning's on. And basically you're looking for about a 15-degree differential for the most part. So if the house is 70 degrees and you turn the air conditioner on, you should see air coming out of the vents in the mid 50s, vice versa with the heat coming out. Furnace is going to be different. You have gas heat, you're going to see 100+ degrees. It's going to be very warm, which is why you get warm so quickly. One of the things I try and tell my clients all the time, and anybody, like we said, this is a stressful time. Home inspector walks in and he is ready to create disaster for you. There's no perfect houses. I always have a long list of stuff, almost regardless of the house, unless it's brand new. And even then I sometimes have a pretty good list. That doesn't mean the house is bad. That just means there's things that we can work on. Some of them are small, some of them are big. Like I said, the big costs are the ones we want to try and avoid or at least be aware of. So we're working that into whatever financial decisions you're making. You'll find also, if you're looking to flip a house or turn a house, a home inspector comes in there, they're going to bring other people with them. They're going to bring other things with them. They might bring a pest inspector looking for termites. They might bring a septic inspector in there. They might do radon testing. If you're not familiar with radon gas, I'd say probably half the inspections that I do, we test for radon in, based on the client wanting that. So if you're not familiar with radon gas, that would be a whole separate presentation. So I don't want to take up our time with that, but I would say go online, look it up. It's the second leading cause of lung cancer in the US right now. So currently in this area, sort of the North Raleigh, Wake Forest area is where we see it more concentrated. There's kind of the map there. You can see when you get out towards the mountains that the red is bad. The orange is like on the bubble, and then the yellow is pretty good. So when I get out to North Raleigh and Wake Forest and Franklinton out that way, I generally see higher levels of radon out there. And not to say we don't find it below that, but it certainly happens more predominantly out there. And these are things that, you may not be interested in flipping, but understand that, a client may come in and get it. And I think for the most part, if it's over the EPA regulations of 4, most of the time they'll be required to, mitigate the house prior to selling it. So that can be an expense. Off the top of my head, I'd say I've seen them range $750 to $100 to $1,000 in mitigating radon in a house. So that's sort of the quick run through for a home inspection. I think if it's okay, I'll just keep going and then I can kind of open it up to the end. And anybody has any questions, just sort of keep them as you're going along, and we'll put it all together at the end if that works.
That works.
Okay. So septic tanks. And, I wanted to talk about this one because I think people come in and they walk to a house, and I'll give you a quick example. Last week, we went to do about a 40-year-old house. We were doing an inspection on it. And I brought my septic inspector out there, but he was only there to scope the line because the city and the listing party had both said it was previously on septic. Now it was on county water or city water, or city sewage rather. And we'll look a little bit what those two things are. But we got out there and there was city sewage run to the road, but nobody had ever hooked this house up. So it was, misrepresented by accident by the listing agent. The city didn't seem to know what they were talking about. We went in and scoped the line. It went into the backyard and into a septic tank, not out to the road. So, these are things that can jump at you at the last minute. And the particular buyer in this case did want to deal with a septic tank. And, the long story short, the septic tank actually ended up being under a concrete patio, which made it even worse because then you have to tear that patio up to do anything with it. This house was, in my opinion, looked like what somebody had done as a flip or something similar to that, where they bought and wanted to turn it over. They'd done the painting in the walls and cleaned up some stuff, updated some fixtures. But they thought, just like we did, that it was on county water. And now they got a house that's got a septic tank that's under a concrete patio. So, at this point, you have two options. You can go ahead and get them to run it to the road, which, if anybody's priced that before, you're looking probably in the $6,000 to $8,000 area to run sewage from the road to your house and get that hooked in. Or you can tear up the patio and deal with the septic tank, which you may have to do anyway, because long-term, the septic tank potentially could be a collapsible item too. So this particular house, is going to be spending a little more money than they thought they were now, which is too bad. And that's where septic tanks, like I said, sometimes people don't really pay attention to what's going on with that, because, we're looking to make sure fixtures look nice. And, it's got either new floors, hardwood floors, or laminate floors. And by the way, as a home inspector, the cosmetics really make no difference to me when I'm walking in there. So what might look really appealing to a client is not necessarily going to make any difference to me one way or the other. I could be looking at wallpaper from 40 years ago and think the same thing as a fresh coat of paint, because I'm looking for, problems, and I'm looking for, how something is affecting another thing. So anyway, we'll run through these septic tank pieces here. So what I want to do is just give you a basic understanding of the septic systems, how they work, and how they can fail, and help give you better knowledge. And also, when you're talking with clients and stuff like that, if you have better knowledge, somebody mentioned earlier they didn't know anything about septic tanks. If you have a little bit of knowledge, you'll feel more comfortable having that conversation and talking about them. All right, so water treatment. So we have city, and then we have what we talked about, on-site residential septic tanks. So with the city sewage, that's getting out of there pretty quickly. It's, run out to the streets. You'll see a little diagram here, taken down to a sewage treatment facility where they separate everything, theoretically hopefully do some good disinfecting, and then it basically makes its way right back out to the environment. The process really isn't much different for residential sewage treatment. The idea is the water is going to leave your house. It's going to go in the backyard to a storage tank where the bulk of it's going to stay there. And then the water, the drainage is going to come off and go out into a leach field. And once that soaks through the soil actually purifies it and makes its way back into the environment. And it's harmless, should be harmless to the environment, providing everything's going well. All right, so on-site treatment of wastewater. This is pretty typical, especially on more lots that are a little larger. Maybe homes are spaced a little better. When you get into a newer neighborhood and you see what we look at as like cookie cutter houses that are right next to each other, those aren't going to be on septic. You don't even have to concern yourself with it, because you need enough land to have a septic system. If you see a house with land, you got to question whether it does have a septic system. A lot of times neighborhoods are built with that in mind. I personally live in a neighborhood that now could have sewage if it wanted, but they built it prior to that. So we are all on septic tanks here. Well, we all had to have lots perk at a certain size to make sure we could get that. There's three major components to it. You have your septic tank, which will be close proximity to the house. You'll have a drainage field or a leach field. In between those two, you're gonna have a distribution box or a drop box. That basically, your leach field, you'll see a diagram in a minute, is multiple lines out in the yard that the wastewater runs off into. And that distribution box channels it to those boxes. And some distribution boxes can actually be adjusted so more can go to certain lines. Most of them today aren't like that. They're pretty just consistent, but some of the older ones can actually be like that. So one of the things I'll note to you is, we'll stop here for a second. When we have a septic inspection come out during the home inspection, like I said, I always work with the septic inspector. When we they'll go out there and they'll dig the holes, they'll pull the distribution, they'll pull the tank top off, and they'll look at the distribution box. I would say more often than not, these little distribution boxes, you're talking about something that's, maybe 6 inches by 9 inches or 12 inches by 9 inches. It's not that big. Some of the larger systems may have a little bigger box. They crack very easily. Unlike a septic tank, they're very small, thin concrete shells. And, theoretically walking on them shouldn't do anything to it, but sometimes people put too much pressure on these. We find all the time broken. This is a $600 fix have a little distribution box. So when we talked about money earlier, that's where some money can start adding up pretty quickly, and things that you should factor in if you're going to be looking at a house with a septic system. All right, so basic quick diagram, that's what it looks like. Leaves the house, goes to a septic tank. The sludge all settles to the bottom, and then the rest of it heads out to the leach field. The tank is designed to separate things. So obviously there's solid waste going out there. And there's a layer at the bottom that's that sort of that solid waste. And then there's kind of what they call a scum layer at the top. And the idea is to separate those two. And the septic tanks are built specifically to do that, and then to allow just the liquid water drainage to head out through the middle. This is probably the best picture to sort of show you that, where it comes in, the heavy waste sits at the bottom, there'll be a little layer of scum at the top, and then that affluent liquid goes through that baffle and then heads out to the leach field. Most tanks, people think, oh, I got an access tank. Most tanks have at least 2 access points because you have that baffle in between. Some even have 3. Occasionally you'll see them above ground. You'll see green circles that look like a sewage top you'd see in the street, except it's green, and that's usually identified as the top to these septic systems. There's a look at one right there. So the drainage field. So we talked a little bit about that, but the idea is it's supposed to take those liquids called effluent away from the septic tank, and they run through perforated lines. And there's several different ways for leach fields to be done. The 2 main ones that we'll see almost all the time are either gravel with a perforated pipe that runs in it, or we'll see styrofoam bundles with a perforated pipe in between it. And I'll show you a picture of that in a second here. Another picture of the tank there for us to look at. So that's kind of how the leach field looks when it sends everything out. And that box right in the center there, that's that distribution box that I tell you so often I find them damaged. I'd say probably a third of the inspections we do, that box ends up going on the list of things that needs to be replaced. There's another look at that. The perforated pipe that we talked about. So sludge is a material that doesn't decompose. So that's stuff that builds up over time, and that's why we eventually need to get tanks pumped out. There's different schools of thought on there, but I'll tell you, most of the people who deal with septic systems, the school of thought is it needs to be pumped on a regular, at least semi-regular basis. The idea behind a septic tank is everything that goes in there is supposed to be biodegradable, and it would eventually go away. Unfortunately, we as people don't always do a great job of throwing biodegradable stuff in there. Inevitably between, us not knowing, or kids or guests, something gets thrown in the toilet that's not supposed to be there, and it just doesn't degrade over time like it's supposed to. How often do you need a pump? Well, it really depends on the size of the tank, size of the family, that kind of thing. When a septic inspector goes in there, they're testing things that you're not going to look for. They test to see how much sludge is at the bottom, how high the scum mat is compared to the top of the pipe, those kind of things. But that lets them know that it's overdue for a cleaning. These are just some generalized statistics on pumping tanks. I would hope that nobody ever has to pump it every year. If you have a house that's big enough to handle a lot of people, it shouldn't be a 500-gallon tank. It's probably a 1,000-gallon tank, which is what you see here. School of thought with when I work with my septic inspector is 3 to 5 years is just a general consensus. If you do it every 3 to 5 years, you'll be in good shape. And that'll take care of getting that out of there for you. Generally speaking, I think it's probably $300 to have a tank pump. It's not a big deal, and it's something that you should do on a regular basis, because the result of not doing that is much worse. If you think about septic systems backing up, not functioning as they're supposed to, those kind of things. These are more homeowner things, so I won't spend much time on those, but just things that you can do to limit how much is going out into the septic field there. Washing machine, don't do all your laundry on Saturday. Try and do it throughout the week. You'll notice you may even notice your backyard getting wet if you try and do it all one day all the time. Now, as you're going in and you're doing flips and fixing things, you have the option to upgrade toilets. Obviously, you want to be looking for low flow toilets, things that are going to, make sure that you're using as little water going out to those fields as possible. A lot of people talk about putting additives in there. You know, when I was growing up, my dad was a big advocate. He was always throwing something lye or something into the septic tank that got Rid-X to supposedly beat back what's going on in there. There's natural occurring bacteria in there. The bacteria that's in there will take care of what's going on. There may be some circumstances where it may be different. And, you know, that may be something where if somebody takes a lot of antibiotics in the house, maybe the house just doesn't have people in it on a regular basis. And you may find that too, when you go into, you know, do a rehab or a flip or something like that. You may go into a house that hasn't been occupied either, which can make a certain change in how you look at things, because if there is a septic issue, you may not know it without running some water. You know, one of the things my septic inspector will do is he'll talk about if it is a house that's been unoccupied, going and running water for just a few hours, just to try and get water running out to the field. So another reason to kind of have a septic inspection, or at least have an understanding of where the field may be, is you want to know what people have done to it. I can't tell you how many times I go to a house where people have created their driveway over a septic tank. You know, and once that's done, there's nothing we can do without bringing in a backhoe to pull it up. You know, they start planting trees in the middle of the leach field, which the root systems get in there and start messing up the way the water leaches out to that field. So if you can start having an understanding of what it looks like, one of the things you can do, and once again, it depends on how detailed you go into a house. If you can determine where the clean out is or where the sewage is coming out of the house, the septic tank is going to be within 10 or 15 feet of that. And from that point, there's going to be a leach field nearby. That leach field is going to be on relatively level ground, and it should be more open ground. So it should be pretty easy to catch where these things are. Reasons to replace the tank if it's too small for the family. We were in a house last week where somebody had added a 3-car garage with a whole family suite above it, which basically added an entire extra septic home to the current leach field and current septic tank. Well, the septic tank was built for a 3-bedroom house, not a 4-bedroom house with a full-on apartment suite. So now we have an issue with, it wasn't permitted correctly. So, you know, that was a snag in the selling process, but also the septic system is probably not designed to handle it. Now you can modify those things. They make different machines that can go in and chew up the waste prior to sending it to the septic system, so that the septic system isn't working as hard. But nonetheless, you know, those are a couple things that can come up in there. Leach fields can be tough. You know, like I said, I've lived on a septic system most of my life, so I've been around them for a while. A lot of times a leach field can just finally get worn out, and you know, sometimes they come in and actually put in a supplement field, and you'll actually can baffle between the two fields year to year. But a lot of times it can be a matter of people planting in it, people drove vehicles over it. You know, nothing bigger than really a lawnmower should be driving over leach fields. Now, obviously, you're coming into a property, you have no idea what people have been driving over it all this time. But one of the things that, you know, we'll note as we go through and look at them, when we run water, we'll poke holes in the ground around those leach fields. And I can tell you, it's not a pretty thing when you see a little, you know, geyser spout pop up because you poked a hole near a leach field, and the water is just so absorbed and so overrun in the area there that it can't work its way through anymore. So generally speaking, if you walk in a backyard and it's an occupied home, you'll smell something if the leach field isn't working right. That's usually the first thing that, you know, we'll go to is when we get there, if it's a lived-in home. The unfortunate thing is if it's not a lived-in home, which may be the case with a flip or an investment piece, you won't know that immediately without running some water. So the kids having some fun with the leach field there. So those are the styrofoam ones that they lay out in fields. That's more common now. It allows them to actually have a shorter leach field, which is why they're able to put septic on a little smaller property now than they used to be able to do. Just a couple pictures for viewing there. That's about all the tools it takes for the septic guy is a poker stick and a shovel, and he's gone to work there. Sometimes you'll find they have to actually jump in a pipe to get to the tank based on where the tank may be buried. those are the water levels we're looking to see, that it's down below the pipeline there. Sometimes we'll come in and it'll be lapped up over that pipe, and then it's being overworked at that point. That's them checking. So they stick a pole down there to see how much sludge is left at the bottom. So like we talked about, odors, wet spots in the drainage field. These are things that you can do when you're just going to look at a property. If you can somewhat identify where the leach field is, which could be in the front yard, could be in the backyard. There's not a definite to that, but it should be a relatively open space. See if there's a smell. When I go into a house, my part of the inspection is I'm running tons of water. Every bathroom, every shower, every sink is going to run a lot of water. So that's one of the things that, we run through with that. All right. So just a summary of what we went over. All stuff we went over. All right. So that's the end of the septic piece there. Put this away. All right. So the last thing I sort of wanted to go through here was pull up my file here real quick. I don't know if I'll startle anybody with the first picture. I'm not sure what I got coming up here, so we'll have to see. When I come to a house, sometimes, we go through the house and we've seen a lot of work done. So one of the things I would pose to anybody looking to do a flip or, get involved with trying to rehab a house and getting it ready to go is don't forget about the hidden gems in the crawl space. This is like the one space that nobody ever visits, nobody ever goes. And sometimes even investment properties, the whole area could possibly get missed because that's not where our mindset is. Our mindset is we want to make sure that, client walks into the house, they see some new fixtures, they see nice paint on the wall, or they see an updated floor, something that is going to be visually enticing to them. The client's not going to go, well, let me crawl through the crawl space and see if I feel comfortable down here. I, on the other hand, that's the last place I go in a house after I've run all the water and checked all the appliances and done everything I can do is I end up in the crawl space. I don't know where you guys are at, on how much you want to get involved with looking into these things, maybe prior to making a purchase. If you have a home inspection, they'll check all these things for you. If you don't have a home inspection, I'll give you a quick overview on some of the things that I do when I go into crawl spaces, because this is inevitably, I joke with my realtors sometimes because this is where things can either go really well or can begin to go really bad. And for whatever reason, my picture is not allowing me to go to the next picture, which is not what I wanted. I wanted to go through all the pictures. See all of those.
Can't help you.
Maybe it's what I'm pulling it up in is not the right thing to pull it up in. So let's pull it up in something different.
Also, you may have to bring that screen to the front sometimes. So you may have to, sometimes I have to stop my screen share and then restart it over. Open it up and then restart it over.
Gotcha. Let me see if Windows Viewer will be a little simpler. Yeah, that'll let me do it. Perfect. Can you see the picture okay?
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going around looking for problems in the crawl space. So one of the things that you're looking at here, this is called wood destroying fungus, that little root system you see there. That means the wood's been exposed to water. Now, if I had stuck my screwdriver in there, it would just look like a piece of wood, but that's basically eating the wood from the inside out. When I go through a crawl space, I go to a couple different places. So obviously nobody's going to have time to go through every inch of a crawl space. I go to where door entrances are, to the front and the back of the home, and I go to where plumbing is, and I go to where the HVAC is. A lot of times, if there's an HVAC unit, an air conditioning unit, air handler down there in the crawl space, is really close to the wood. a lot of condensation happens and can get on the wood and cause problems. Under the front and rear door, depending on whether it's covered or not covered. If you have a covered front porch, probably in good shape. Back decks, a lot of times you walk right out to the back deck, there's no cover. I can be sure, 50% of the time I'm going to go under there, pull back the insulation, and I'm going to see what we saw in this previous picture here, which is wood rot that, my screwdriver ends up going right through. For those of you who aren't familiar with the little white critters that can destroy your home, these are termite tunnels. These are very predominant. You would not likely see ones that are this easy to recognize. And it doesn't always have to be an older home too. People think it's a newer home, I don't have issues. This was a 1-year-old home that I was in and had this freeway of a termite tunnel in it. So it doesn't necessarily matter, but these are things that you want to look at, because if these termites have gotten into things, and this is where, once again, your level of knowledge on this is going to be, paramount to what you do. Do you want to have someone come in, check this out from a professional basis, a home inspector or a termite inspector, or are you versed well enough to come in and look at this stuff? These are just a couple pictures of those things that, pop up in there. You can see right along here, those little stripes, that's some of that wood destroying fungus again. And you can see over here where that wood rot has sort of chewed it away. One of the things I test when I go into a crawl space, one of the first things I do is I check the moisture in the wood itself. I carry a moisture meter with me as I go through there. Sometimes I don't need it. You can look at that. You can tell it's wet. You can tell it's kind of gnarly. Not a big deal. But my goal is to test the wood. Now, moisture meter, you can pick up a really nice one for several $100s, but you can pick up a relatively inexpensive one for under $100. Now, they're not as accurate as I would like it to be. So that's not what I'm going to carry with me. But if you were just wanting to get a basic idea of about where your wood moisture levels are down there, you could pick up, a $75 moisture meter at Lowe's and probably be just fine. If you check the wood moisture level levels and it's below 19%, that generally means you're in a pretty safe situation. If it's over 19%, it's not as safe anymore. Two numbers I would want you to remember. 19% is where organic growth can begin, mold, those kind of things. 28% is where wood is fully saturated and it will start destroying the cells of the wood. And you'll see pictures like the other ones where my screwdriver was going right through the wood. There's some more of that there. You can see all the condensation on the insulation here. A quick look into any crawl space and you'll notice whether there's a vapor barrier down. For those of you who aren't familiar with that, it's just a sheet of plastic that covers the entire floor of a crawl space. If you look in a crawl space and there's no moisture, no vapor barrier down, you can be sure that there's probably a little higher level of moisture in that crawl space than you want, just based on that. They didn't require those, except for maybe the last 20 years in certain areas, but they've been using them for much longer. So some houses have them, some don't. Another interesting thing I see. So as you go in and you're looking for a house to flip, if you walk and you start feeling a lot of bounce in a floor, sometimes you can be, estimate that there's possibly going to be some problems in the crawl space with the support structure. If you look at this board here, this one was obviously damaged. You can see some brown rot on it there. The board beside it was something that they sistered in to try and support it. Now that may do the job temporarily, but for me, I got to walk in there now. I got to call it out as a problem because that secondary board that was put there should have run the full length from one bearing point to another. And like I said, I don't want to make this about getting into a lot of specifics on things, but if it doesn't look right, it's generally not right. And that's the same thing with this post over here on the left, where they obviously are just trying to hold up that particular joist by nailing one thing to another. There's some heavy moisture. That's my moisture meter there. So you remember I told you 19 and 28, and that one's at 76. It's basically soaking wet at this point. Just a couple more of those. And if you look right above the moisture meter, you'll see a smear mark. So that's when I told you growth begins. It's topical right there. It's on top of the wood and I can smear it, which means it hasn't started doing anything yet. But the key word is yet. More people trying to sort of band-aid a problem down there. And if you look at this one, so what they did here, is this main band that runs through the center. It's a main girder. Obviously it's deteriorated. That's pretty obvious. They put some newer wood joist in there, but they put it to a damaged piece of wood, so it's not going to hold up. So these are things that, once again, I got to call out. Now I'll tell you, when we talk about expenses, when you have to do some of the work that we just looked at in the crawl spaces, where it's repairing major joists, major support girders, we're not talking a few $100s, unless of course they fix it the way they did in some of these pictures. You're talking thousands of dollars sometimes to get these things fixed. That's why it's, to me, it would, if I was buying a home for an investment, or if I was flipping a house, it would be paramount to me to know that the crawl space is not in need of thousands and thousands of dollars worth of work. And these are easy things you can go in and kind of look at and say, okay, it's obvious there's some problems here. This you can see from anywhere in the crawl space. You see all the hanging insulation there. When it spiders down like that, that's due to it being wet and saturated and it's starting to string out. You can see this crawl space doesn't have any plastic on the floor. This was a dirt crawl space, which, by the way, us as home inspectors really don't like, because by the time we get through that dirt crawl space, most of it's found its way into every possible open crevice in our suits and our shoes and everything else. So we like plastic. So I told you I look around plumbing as well, because when I pull back stuff near plumbing, you can find wet spots on floors like this that may be potentially around a toilet or something like that, where the water's just saturated out. So when I talked about deflection in floor, so these are some interesting fixes that people have come up with here. Once again, I think anybody could look at this and go, that's probably not right. So when I look at something like this, they're obviously putting a support post in. They stacked a few pieces of concrete block and then put a post in. Without explaining all the codes and dynamics behind it, just know that any post that goes in has to be just like any other post or column throughout the house. It has to go into a footing. So it should have a footing below the frost line. Obviously, this is not a footing below the frost line. These are cinder blocks thrown on the dirt. If there's deflection in the floor, and that's why they put it there, or sagging in the floor, we're not talking about a structural problem. So now we're calling in structural engineers. And that is one of the last things that anybody wants to hear when I walk out of a home inspection is you need to call a structural engineer. Because I know just to talk to one, they're in hundreds and hundreds of dollars, and that doesn't include whatever the fix might be. I can tell you from a crawl entrance, you can stick your head in with a flashlight and see sometimes that they've put supplementary supports in there. And that might be an indicator that that could be a problem for you. Another picture of some fungus and some mold, which is exciting stuff. These are two more support posts here where somebody has taken a 4x4 post and just kind of put it on the dirt to support something above it. Once again, these are things that I end up having to call out when I'm in there that somebody didn't do right. I'm not sure how much longer that one's going to make it. All right, so we're back to the beginning there. So my basic takeaway is there can be a lot going on in a crawl space. And I think it's the unforgotten area in a home sometimes. So if you're getting into a home that you want to invest some in, either get yourself versed well enough to take a peek in the crawl space or get someone to go in there for you. That's a professional that can check it out. Because this can certainly put you back in some money. Because once I come through for a home inspection for a buyer, I'm going to point it all out. Which is why they made a point at the beginning that nobody likes to see me. Because I come in and I point out all the bad stuff. The one other thing that I would say as you're going through and upgrading houses that I come across, one of the things that I see a lot, everybody likes new fixtures and plumbing has to be updated from time to time. If you have someone go in and install new fixtures in your house to flip it, turn it, rent it, whatever you're doing, or if you notice that you're buying a house that somebody's done that in, run the fixtures. I would say probably out of new fixtures installed, 1 in 5 leaks. Somebody didn't seal something up right. Somebody didn't tighten something up right. I go in the house, I turn on all the water and stuff starts leaking. And it's, like I said, more often than not, it's new stuff. Just because something maybe didn't get put in the way they were supposed to. And you get those water leaks in the house, they end up down in the crawl space. So those are some of the things that I would point out for that. Now, I could go on for probably all night, but I don't want to do that, about different things that I see in houses. But I think those are the main things. And I think that if you have an understanding of how long systems last in houses, be it the air conditioner, the water heater, the furnace, whatever it might be, and then also understanding your big ticket items, what might be involved if you find something in a crawl space. You know, those are things that monetarily are going to be important to you. If you're trying, I mean, anybody invested in property, I'm assuming you're doing this to make money. You're not doing this to give away money. So as you go through and put yourself in a position where you have to do some investing, you want to make sure that you do it in a way that is going to be as profitable as possible. Now, you may have these problems, and that's fine. But if you know them going in, at least you can make that decision. Is the deal good enough that it's worth the fix? All right, so I will open it up now to questions, or you can either chat or you can, I don't know if we can unmute, or what's the best way to do that?
Y'all put your questions in the chat if you have any. Let's see, don't have any yet. Y'all put your
Well,
questions.
either I put everybody to sleep, or my comments were so good that there's no questions to be had.
Someone's asking, are you yourself an investor?
I have had rental property in the past. Right now, I currently don't have any rental property. But generally, when I've moved from one house to the next, I've kept my previous homes and rented them until I felt the right time to sell them. So I have done some investing with property in the past.
I
All
have
right,
a question.
if no one has anything else, let's see. What are your thoughts on the electrical system and what type of inspection to require? They're coming in. The questions are coming in now.
Good. Okay, perfect. So I did put everybody to sleep. Excellent. So the electrical is part of the home inspection too. We look at a lot of things throughout there. I test outlets in the house. I also pull the panel covers off for everything when it relates to distribution boxes and things like that. What I would say from your perspective walking into a house, the biggest thing I would tell you to do is know the date of the house you're walking into. There was a span of time from the early 60s to the early to mid 70s that stands out the most. They were using aluminum branch wiring at that time. Some of you guys may be familiar with that. If you're purchasing a house in that time frame and it has aluminum branch wiring, you're going to have to fix it, and it's not going to be cheap. They have a 55% chance, higher chance of starting a house fire than the copper wiring we are currently using and have used for a long time. Basically, when we went to war back then, we needed to find a cheaper metal, and they went with aluminum. And when you did aluminum in the small branch, they would expand more than copper. They would come loose and they would start fires. That was around 63 to maybe 74, that time frame. If you go in and you open up a distribution panel, so wherever your breaker box is, you open it up, there's two names I would have you look for. And they stopped using these maybe 30 plus years ago, so you won't see them on newer homes. But one of them is Zinsco, begins with a Z, and the other one is Stablock. You see either one of those two, you're probably going to have a home inspector come in and tell you that they need to be evaluated and potentially replaced. Both of those were difficult, hazardous breaker boxes. As far as other things go with electrical, I get more concerned when I see that there's been significant upgrades or add-ons. Like we had this house I was telling you about that had an additional garage with a mother-in-law suite put in. They obviously had to run a lot more electricity. So I'm going to be concerned that they missed something. And it may be something even small. Sometimes I'll go around and test outlets to make sure that they're all working. I'll find some of them are miswired or not working properly because when they rewired all the boxes, they made a mistake. But the big thing with the electrical piece of it is safety for me. That's what I'm looking at. And that's why those things stand out. That aluminum branch wiring, like I said, 63 to 74. And then the two names, Zinsco and Stablock. If you see those, go ahead and put a price in there for what it's going to take to replace that entire panel probably. What else? Maybe I should be looking at these here.
let's see here. Floor joist replacement can be a couple of thousand. Say it's isolated to just under the bathroom. Can you estimate a general cost? Again, it depends.
So yeah, so it's tough for me to generalize a cost, and I'll also throw two things at you. One, the state like forbids me from recommending somebody, so I'll never be able to do that for anybody. They look at it as a conflict of interest. But I would say this: it depends on what's going wrong with it. If it's a small leak, let's say under a toilet, and all they're going to end up coming in doing is replacing what's wrong with the plumbing, which may be a few $100s. And if it's a full toilet replacement, maybe $500. And then as far as the framing underneath it, if it's dry and it's not damaged, there's not going to be much to do. Sometimes I'll see them come in with a couple, 2x10 cross supports just to sort of add some extra bracing. But it's usually, unless it's damaged to the point where it's falling, and even if it is, it's still not a huge expense to replace one little section like that. Those aren't the bigger deals. The bigger deals are when the moisture levels in the crawl space as a whole have kicked up and you have multiple joists that are in bad shape and damaged. That's when you're going to be talking, anywhere from, I don't want to like scare people off here, but I mean, I've seen numbers anywhere from $5,000 over $10,000 for repairs and crawl spaces when it comes to damaged joists based on moisture damage.
That's a lot of damage. Like that's a lot.
Yeah, that's throughout. That means they're coming in and they're doing, they're basically replacing everything down there. But the other piece you come into is you may find that like, even if it's a medium-sized section, you may be in a couple thousand for it. You may have a client or a renter or somebody that's going to come in and want somebody from a hygienist standpoint to look at it too, because once you have that fungus and mold in there, how much of that is in the air, how much of that's being breathed above it. One of the things that I have clients request me to do, I go in and I do air spore testing and send that off to the lab so they can see if there's mold in the air. Sometimes that tells us if there's hidden water damage in the walls.
If you asked, can you see the questions in the chat, Leslie? Because I got booted off and when I come back, they're all gone. There were a few questions.
Yeah, I can. Farrah's asking. Okay, number one on the hit list. Let's talk about polybutylene, please. I just had it removed, all of it removed from a little wrench that I'm doing right now because I can't be bothered going through the grief.
Of listening to a home inspector tell you how bad it is.
It's a crock of crap is what it is.
Go
ahead.
So, yep, no, I hear you. Polybutylene, there's probably two real tough things, and they both run about the same time frame. One of them is polybutylene, and the other one's hardboard, or you might know it as masonite siding. So polybutylene, two things. It sort of came in two different stretches. One of them had copper bands and the other one didn't. It had sort of a plastic band. The copper band ones are theoretically the better of the two. So they didn't have as many problems. But polybutylene as a whole, the dilemma comes is the way they rupture. You can't see it until they do it. So it's not like copper piping where I can see corrosion and maybe it's starting to get a little green and I can see the dissimilar metals having that problem. With polybutylene, it splinters sort of internally and then ruptures, and it can make a big mess. What I generally tell clients when I'm talking to them is like, you have polybutylene in your house. So there's two things you need to look at. One, make sure insurance is going to cover you if you have it. Because sometimes insurance companies will change how they price you based on polybutylene being in your house. So that's a conversation to have with your insurance coverage. Beyond that, polybutylene hasn't been used since the mid 90s. It was mostly the early 90s even. So if it's still working in a house 30 years later, it's probably not going to break based on polybutylene. That's not to say it's not going to leak or not going to go bad. I mean, you got to remember there's no plumbing that's permanent. Eventually all plumbing has to have some sort of replacement in there. But at this point in time, I mean, 20 years ago, yeah, we were seeing lots of problems, and they did obviously 30 years ago, which is when they stopped using it. But at this point, if you have polybutylene and it's made it to 2021, that's probably not going to be the undoing in your house. And I usually tell people that. Now, the state has some really ugly language that I have to put in my report. So it goes in my report, but I usually try and have me personally, I try and have a reasonable conversation with them. and let them know, it should never be a deal breaker. Otherwise, you're not going to look at about 15, 20 years worth of houses.
Thank you very much.
So, but that's my personal take on it. So the other one is hardboard masonite siding. So this was probably the single worst siding they ever came up with, and they loved it. They basically took like a sawdust composite material and glued it all together, formed it into a pretty plank and stuck it on the side of a house. And the second it got the least bit wet, it swelled up and allowed water to get behind it. I actually think I probably have more of a problem with hardboard siding than I do polybutylene, to be honest with you, because it hides everything. I can't see anything behind it. So unless you do something invasive, you're not going to know what is done or how much is damaged. Now, one of the things I look for, this hardboard siding, masonite siding, it usually goes bad from the ground up. Usually the worst planks are towards the bottom. So when I walk around a house, if it's built between, I don't know, about that same polybutylene time, the late 70s to early to mid 90s, if it's a wood siding, it's probably that. And you can go around the lower pieces of the lower planks of that siding and poke at it. And you can even sometimes see it's bubbled a little bit. If it's bubbled a little bit, you can be sure the water's gotten in behind it and it's starting to rot it out. Usually the fix is they'll come in and they'll replace the damaged pieces with a fiber cement, which is what we see on houses now. It looks very similar. You can paint it the same color. And most of the time when I take buyers and realtors around homes and we look at it, they don't even realize that there is fiber cement mixed in with it. So it blends in pretty well. So you don't have to replace the whole siding on those type homes. You can sometimes just come in and get rid of the bad pieces, which inevitably is usually the lower extremities and around windows and penetrations and stuff like that.
Alrighty, and April is asking if you can tell if you have, I'm assuming this is related to the septic system, but if you have sewage issues, can you tell if your grass is discolored?
Not specifically. I mean, that wouldn't be something the thing you would probably see the most that would stand out is you might see your grass is actually greener and better.
Yeah.
And that's probably not really a good thing, but I think everybody has a little bit of that, but it's mostly because of the extra water going into that area. But generally it's not going to be necessarily discoloration in that area.
No.
And sometimes to the adverse, if it's an unoccupied house, that might actually look less green and more dried out because the leach field's now empty and it's not getting any water.
Exactly. Okay, and Manny is asking about ungrounded outlets. Do you need to replace them or something to do with the fuse panel?
Gotcha. So here's the thing with an ungrounded outlet. An ungrounded outlet technically isn't ungrounded.
Mm-hmm.
So a quick sort of lesson on grounding for electricity. All systems are grounded in a way, but they're not necessarily grounded on site. So what I mean by that is sometime in the late 60s, I want to say maybe it was the mid 60s, they started grounding everything on site. So in other words, they would take a grounding wire and they'd either put it to a plumbing pipe, or by the 70s, they were putting them to the rods you see sticking out of the ground. Prior to that, there wasn't an on-site grounding, but theoretically the electricity that goes to your home goes back to the power plant. That's where it's supposed to go. So on that note, technically they are. Now, the ungrounded outlets you're talking about, my concern is when I go into a house that's, pre-grounding time, an older house for an on-site grounding system, somebody's replaced all the outlets with 3-prong outlets. And technically they don't have an on-site ground. So the concern there is if you plug something into it that needs that grounding outlet to work correctly, it's not going to, and you can actually damage whatever item you're hooking up to it, be a computer or something like that. I don't have a problem if they've left it as a 2-prong outlet, because then you're not going to plug anything into it other than a lamp or something small. And I see that a lot in some older houses. They may not rewire every room. They'll leave the bedrooms with just 2-prong outlets because you're going to plug in lamps and alarm clocks and stuff like that, or iPhone chargers, those kind of things that aren't going to be a problem. If I come across that and I see a 3-prong outlet and it's not grounded, then yeah, it needs to be fixed, and that has to be either fixed on site or has to be fixed through the panel, and it could be either way. And now you're talking about rerunning wires through the wall.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's not a cheap and easy quick fix.
Got you. Okay, Jacqueline has got apparently a rather involved question about septic, and given that we're already 15 minutes over, maybe Mike, you can just put your contact email in the chat, and maybe she can send. Is it okay if she sends you a quick email and asks you?
Absolutely.
That would be great. Is that okay, Jacqueline? Okie dokie, sweetie. Thank you. All righty, everybody. We've, Miss Karen, I think we've answered everybody's questions and then some, but very informative, yeah.
And that goes for anybody. If somebody wants to send me an email or reach out to me, ask questions, I can see there's still several questions left in that box there. So by all means, shoot me an email. I'll be glad to respond to you on that.
That'd be great.
I have one quick final question, if that's okay. What would you recommend? Do you think is a good recommendation as a flipper before you put the house on the market to do a home inspection that will pick up any potential problems? Because unfortunately, once the buyer has seen your report, they can't unsee it. So an expensive exercise. So for high end houses, it justifies it, but for lower end houses, is there any kind of like miniature version you could do as a potential seller?
There are. I personally, as a home inspector, I don't do it just because it doesn't work well with my business model. But technically, you can do a home inspection on 2 systems or more. So in other words, when I do systems, I do roof, I do electrical, I do HVAC, I do structural, I do all these different systems. As a licensed home inspector, we can do as little as 2. So I could do HVAC and structural.
Okay.
It doesn't work for my business model, so I don't do that. But there are home inspectors out there that probably would be willing to do that,
Gotcha.
based on what you're looking at there. And I a whole nother would be a whole nother presentation. But there's statistical facts out there based on listing with a home inspection. That right now, let's be honest about the market the way it is. I mean, anything's going to sell right now. You got so many people fighting over a house right now; it's almost scary at this point. But that's not going to stay that way. Eventually, the market will go back to more normalcy. And when that happens, statistically speaking, when you have a home inspection on a pre-listing house, which we had done quite regularly in the past, you get an increased profit margin over what a normal house will sell for, and you can turn it in quicker time. Because first of all, you know what's wrong, and maybe you can get a couple of those things cleared up, and you can add that into the home inspection. And B, the person buying it's going to feel a whole lot more comfortable with that.
Yeah, I mean, they would potentially pay their own inspector to make sure that they've got their own back covered.
Right. And they probably would still have their own come in there.
Right.
But from a pre-listing standpoint, once we get back to a more normal market, I mean, having someone come in there, and when you're dealing with a flip, because you never generally live there, so there's hidden things that you may not catch. So even in now's time, I mean, I've had more houses in the last couple months that have gone under contract, and despite huge due diligence, people have walked away from because of the market the way it is. People are fighting over these houses so quick they don't even look at it. They're doing sight unseen, and then by the time they get there and I'm going through an inspection, it can get ugly.
Yeah. Right. Okay, people, there we go. Thank you so much, Mike. That was fantastic. I know it's a real worry for us people that are selling flips. And Mike's put his contact details in the chat, and I'm presuming it will be the recording will be available, so you can see it on there. And if anyone's got any questions, they can contact you. But thank you, Mike.
That'd be great. I really appreciate you letting me come on. It's always fun to have a little change of pace. So it was enjoyable. I appreciate it.
And thanks everyone for joining us on a Tuesday night, and we will see you in a couple of hours.
New investors.
Yep. Okay.
Mike. Great meeting.
Thank you. Great presentation, Mike.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Stay safe.
Take care.
There we go.
Hey, Ron.